In this video we're going to be looking at the extract from Out of the Blue by Simon Armitage, and this is the second poem in the conflict section of the AQA Poetry Anthology for the GCSE Literature exam. So here's the poem, from Out of the Blue. You have picked me out. Through a distant shot of a building burning, you have noticed now that a white cotton shirt is twirling, turning. In fact, I am waving, waving. Small in the clouds, but waving, waving. Does anyone see a soul worth saving? And when will you come? Do you think you are watching a man shaking crumbs or pegging out washing? I am trying and trying. The heat behind me is searing, searing, but the white of surrender is not yet flying. I am not at the point of launching, leaving. A bird goes by. The depth is appalling. Appalling that others like me should be windmilling, wheeling, spiralling, falling. Are your eyes believing, believing? Here in the gills I am still breathing. But tiring, tiring. Sirens below me are wailing, firing. My arm is numb and my nerves are sagging. Do you see me, my love? I am failing. Flagging. Okay, so going through the FLIRTS, form, language, imagery, rhythm, rhyme, tone and subject. As you will know, we need to start with the subject. We need to think about what the poem is about, and I like to try and put the subject into one succinct sentence. So this is what I think the poem is about, that it imagines the last desperate moments of a victim of the attack on the Twin Towers in 2001, and this part of the poem is actually inspired by the falling man image that was captured in by photographers, by the film crew, of a man who had jumped from the building to escape from what would have been perhaps a more painful death. And really the victims were, caught between a rock and a hard place. There was the fire, the burning building that they were trapped in, and their only escape was to jump from the building. And this poem explores the feelings of such a victim. Now, when we go to the form, I just thought I'd show you what the poem looked like if we turned it on its side. And I know that some students that I have taught this particular feature of the poem have found it a bit tenuous. They think, oh, you're reading too much into it. But if you look at the poem on its side, I think there's an image coming out just in the way that the poem is structured. I also think that possibly if you look at the poem normally itself, it looks like a tower, as it's quite a thin, long poem, and then the longer lines perhaps representing the smoke coming out from the tower. But again, some students have found that perhaps I'm clutching at straws with that particular interpretation, but I definitely think there is something to be said about this horizontal view. So it's also important to remember that it's an extract from a longer poem, and you can go online and look at the whole poem, but this particular extract, it's like a chapter, so it is kind of contained in a way, and because it's an extract, sometimes the context of the poem is a little hard, the subject is harder to work out, so it's probably useful for anyone to go away and look at the poem as a whole. The longer lines, as I've said, they resemble skyscrapers. I mean, I think that the poem as a whole, when viewed horizontally, looks like a skyline, and particularly the famous Manhattan skyline of the different buildings, and the longer lines looking like the taller skyscrapers. Now the poem is divided into 4 line stanzas, which is a uniform structure. However, and we'll talk about this more in when we get to the rhythm section as well, the stanzas aren't all the same. They're not uniform throughout this. The pattern is not consistent, and this perhaps reflects that the speaker is trying to remain calm and think about procedures and so forth, but they're unable to do so because of the panic of the situation that they are in. Language. Here on the left, I have picked out some of the quotations. These aren't the only quotations that I would use, but these are some of them. So, you have picked me out, twirling, turning, launching, leaving, bullying, appalling, spiraling, falling. Okay, that last one is not, they're just single words that I picked out. That's not a complete quote in itself. So first of all, the poem, there's a lot of the use of first and second person pronouns. Okay, the first person pronoun would be me, I, and the second person pronouns would be you. There's lots of repetition and pairing of words, as the 2 bullet points over here: twirling, turning, launching, and leaving. And then there is a few words in the poem which have some double consonants in, and particularly, as you can see in this last bullet point, bullying, appalling, spiraling, falling, they all have a double L. And that may be significant in terms of the image that it can create. So I think the pronouns make the poem feel immediate, as if it's happening now. You have picked me out. It's addressing the reader. It's making a connection between the reader and the voice of the poem, and therefore we are connected with the victims of the attacks. Famously, the attack was caught on camera, and it was caught on film, and the majority of the world, most of the world, saw it live on TV, and there was this connection with the event. I remember viewing it myself live on TV and feeling a connection between what I was watching, the people that were suffering and the people that were falling to their deaths, and me on the other side of the world watching it on my TV screen. The repetition of the words reflects the desperation of the voice. They're in a desperate situation, and the repetition shows that. And then the pairing of the words in the double consonants, particularly the double L, I think, creates an image, and when you see the two L's there on their own, it creates an image. It evokes an image, remembering that analytical vocabulary. It evokes an image of the Twin Towers. I think twirling, turning, which is one of the quotes there, twirling, turning, the TW and the T in that pairing, Twin Towers, is also there, but again, from my Year 11's thought, that was a bit too tenuous, but anyway, it's there, make of it what you will. Imagery. Again, I've only picked out a few words, a few quotations. There are more. So, for example, distant shot of a building burning, and I have discussed with my group the image of the distant shot. Okay, the camera shot, but also the shot as a bullet or a cannon, or the attack. But here we've got white cotton shirt, waving, man shaking crumbs. The heat behind me is bullying, and a bird goes by. The shirt, the white flag of surrender, possibly. There's the alliteration of W in the poem, as well as the repetition of the double L. The man shaking crumbs, and also the pegging out washing. It's an innocuous and mundane image. In other words, it's everyday, it's dull, it's boring, it seems insignificant. The heat is personified, and the bird, of course, could symbolize freedom. So evaluating, in that last slide I was identifying, now we evaluate. The white shirt, representing the flag of surrender, suggests that the speaker is giving up. They are surrendering to the attack and making that decision to jump out. They know that they face death by doing so, but they are surrendering, and they are choosing what might be an easier way out than remaining in a burning building. The alliteration of the letter W, if you look at the letter W, I think it looks like a person waving with both hands. And again, there was these images of lots of people leaning out of the windows and waving with both of their hands. And I think that Armitage is using the W to show this as well. And rather conveniently, it starts the word waving, which he repeats. The innocuous and mundane images, shaking crumbs, hanging out, washing, they contrast with the seriousness of the situation, as if the speaker is again trying to think of his everyday life, their everyday life, but also the contrast of this dull image with the event. The attacks were extraordinary, unprecedented. They were completely out of the blue, as the title suggests, and again out of the blue as an image, out of the blue as a surprise, metaphor for being surprised. But the planes came out of the sky, out of the blue, and these attacks were in no way mundane. The heat being personified, it's a threat to the speaker. It's pushing back the speaker. It's pushing them into the corner. It's pushing them against the window, and they're being bullied. They're being menaced by the fire, by the approaching fire. And the bird. Well, the bird image, this bird of freedom, it's juxtaposed with the speaker's lack of freedom and lack of choice. Their freedom has been taken away by these attacks, and they had no choice. Well, they had only one choice: to stay and die in the fire or the collapsing building, or to jump to their death as a way of escape. So the R of FLIRTS, rhythm and rhyme. It's written in 4-line stanzas, but there is no consistent rhythmic pattern or rhyme scheme, so I am kind of going back over what we discussed in the form section as well. And again, as I said, this shows how the speaker is trying to maintain a sense of order and trying to remain calm, but they are unable to keep this up, and they are flagging, and this is one of the words that gives up, flagging in their desperation, and gradually and eventually giving up. The tone. Okay, so we have the quotes on the left-hand side. Does anyone see a soul worth saving? And I'm failing, flagging. The speaker of the poem is desperate. It's a very sad poem. It's a somber poem, and it's a poem full of despair. It's about someone taking their own life, jumping to their own death, making that choice. And the tone of the poem is despondent. Again, this idea that there's no hope. They feel completely desperate and full of despair, and as a result, there is a lack of hope, particularly when we get to the end. I think. So, what is the effect of this? Well, the speaker of the poem, they're searching for hope through their questions. Does anyone see a soul worth saving? And those words and that image, soul worth saving, is a reference to the Save Our Souls, the SOS distress call. The last line of the poem, I'm failing, flagging. This is the speaker of the poem giving up and jumping to their death. Flagging suggests that they are growing tired, they've been reduced, they're growing weaker, but also it kind of reinforces the image of the white flag of surrender. They have themselves become the flag of surrender in their act of jumping out, which is in itself an act of surrender. And with the poem ending in this way, I think there's the sense of an inevitability, that it was always going, that this was fate for the person from the beginning. There was no escape for them. Not that the attacks were inevitable, but that once the attack had taken place, the end for the speaker was inevitable. And as a result of this, there's a little sense of hope at the end of the poem, and I think that perhaps Armitage, the poet, feels that post 9/11, so after the attacks, was a time of despair.